Sometimes there were a couple years when I got home 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
So
Hi, Carol.
How are you?
It's good to be home.
Hey there, Carol.
How are you doing?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Sorry, my hands are cold.
Oh no, it's all right. Thank you for
Hi,
coming
how are you?
tonight.
Nice to meet you, sir.
So it's good to be home.
What did I have? Good to see you again.
You guys for putting this together tonight.
How are you?
Okay, good showing. And you were,
I'm good. Hi, everyone. Hi, Carol. Hi.
And then,
But yeah, there's a lot of work local here and whatnot. So I can't complain.
yeah.
I pretty much told them I'm just going to
get on camera, so we can have you sit back here.
That's all right.
Oh, yeah, all these you can take and take them tonight.
Spinning it all for you?
Yeah, this is the part I'm trying to get to not spin.
They're free to take, so.
Let's see.
Spring break. How are you?
Yeah, these signs especially make people mad because they say.
And I know.
That's got some.
A tripod just for that.
What's that?
I have a tripod just
Yeah.
for the icon.
I don't have anything.
Hey, Christian,
Yes.
do you know how you contain these where they don't spin that easy?
I can try to figure it out.
I'm doing something wrong here, obviously.
Let's see here.
Are you serious?
Looks like it needs to spin around some more here.
Happening it?
Yeah, it's getting there.
Good deal.
Whoop.
That's all right. We'll go back in.
It's brutal out there. We had some of our signs
Okay,
vandalized,
there we go.
down.
Yeah, just maybe we'll secure it down there.
First got elected, my daughter sent us t-shirts, Trump t-shirts.
I asked you before, you said no.
I wanted to wear them to the debate, but I didn't because I feared it.
Really?
And I thought, here I am, what has happened to our girl that I fear wearing all the time my t-shirt that my daughter got.
Sometimes brothers need to.
And I'm proud he's our president. Oh, I am.
What the heck is going
And
on?
I don't think he was the worst or the best of two evils.
No, I
And I was the best. That's what I wanted. Yes. Yes,
It was a miracle.
yes, it was up on my God. That's true.
Yep.
I don't,
It was milder, but you know, yeah, it wasn't bad.
oh, was it?
Amen. But in the natural,
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on, why this just doesn't want to hold like it should.
I was crying.
But,
Pretty solid foundation here.
yeah, it feels like it. Yeah, actually, that feels loose now. There we go. Okay, we're in business. And I'm going to set this.
giving us a reprieve or a window of opportunity, and we really need to take advantage of it. We do.
They have forgotten.
I know.
But at least the President Trump talks about God.
You know,
All right.
You know, I mean, what a relief.
I know, and he's got good Christian people around him.
Well, I think that's why I said to you, don't you think you're not going to do
I believe it. I believe it. Well, it's in the natural, it looks super
Yeah, you
close,
are. I
so
just got Holy Ghost goosebumps.
it's hard in the natural not to feel nervous because I see this is such a close race, but we're trusting the Lord.
Well, there was a close race because that's what I was going to do for Carving. So I'm still happy to see.
He will. Amen.
All right, guys. Well, tonight, I want to thank everyone coming out to the U.S. Militia Northern Command meeting. And have a special guest, Michael Snyder, here tonight. So, does everyone introduce yourselves to him? So, yeah, we can get this meeting going.
Did you have anything to share first, or?
Well, we're going to start right up here. Would you like to come up here, please, Michael? Well, we're going to start out Pledge of Allegiance. pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do the best I can and like nuts.
Well, tonight, our militia meeting is pretty well going to consist of Michael Snyder. So, again, I thank everyone for coming out. How many of you know what militia is all about? Anyone have any questions? Okay, Michael, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And so you guys want me up here. Usually I like to move around a bit, but maybe I'll move these chairs in a little bit. But thank you guys for coming and spending your evening here with us. And now, you know, many of you are involved in the militia here. Many of you are involved in what's going on here in Shoshone County. But it would be a lot easier to spend your evenings at home, you know, with your feet propped up, watching the television. It'd be a lot easier doing something else rather than this. So why do you come out and participate in something like this? It's because you believe in this country. It's because you want to see something change. It's because you still believe in the values and principles that our founding fathers established this country on, and you want there to be hope for this country. You want there to be hope for our children and our grandchildren. And that's why I'm doing this as well. And so I want to share a little bit about myself, but for those of you who don't know, my name is Michael Snyder, and I'm running for Congress in Idaho's 1st Congressional District. And let me start out tonight by just sharing a little bit about my journey, because God has had me on a very unusual journey to get me to this point. Now, my father was in the U.S. Navy, and how many have had a military parent? Now, my father, you know, military parents, they don't take a lot of nonsense, do they? Yeah. No, not at all. My father didn't take a lot of nonsense. He raised me to be disciplined, and I'm thankful for that. You know, I'm thankful so many of our young people today could really use the kind of discipline that the military instills. But that's what my father instilled in me, is a military discipline. You know, we had a strict household, and that's how we were raised. And I was raised going to church. From as young as I can possibly remember, I was raised going to Baptist churches. In fact, my parents still go to a Southern Baptist church to this day. So from a very early age, I was taught about Jesus Christ died on the cross for our sins. I developed a personal relationship with Jesus Christ at a very early age. Was born again very early, baptized very early. And I was raised as a Christian, raised with Christian values, and was taught that those Christian values gave birth to our Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. And I was taught to have respect for the flag. And I was taught that we were a special nation, that we were a light to the world, that we sent missionaries out to the entire planet, that we were the nation that we did good, that we stood up for righteousness, that we had a purpose, and that purpose was good as a nation. And so that was the kind of the culture I was raised in. Of course, with my father in the Navy, we moved around a lot. Right? Because in the Navy, that's what you do as a military family. Whenever you're stationed somewhere new, you move somewhere else. And so we moved around, including we spent 6 years in Naples, Italy. Do you guys know where that is? It's south of Rome on the coast, and there's a naval base there. My father was stationed in Naples, Italy for 6 years. Got to experience another culture for that time. But then we came back, and we settled in Northern Virginia, and my father was still in the Navy, worked at the Pentagon. And so that's where I went to high school, and then eventually on to college at the University of Virginia, McIntyre School of Commerce, which is one of the top undergraduate business schools in the nation. So graduated from there, went on to law school, University of Florida Law School, where I got a JD and an LLM in taxation, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But what that basically means is that I'm massively, I just have way too much education. If you're worried, concerned what an LLM is, it just means I have way too much education. But then went back from there, back north, where to work. And I'm going to get on your bad side right now by telling you that I was a lawyer. And I'll really get on your bad side here by telling you that I was a Washington, D.C. lawyer. And a lot of times I'll go in front of a crowd and they'll boo and they'll hiss, and good fun. But what I say to people is this: if God can even use the foolish things of this world. If God can even use a former Washington, D.C. attorney for His glory, He can use anyone. And that's what He did. And so, there, when I was working in D.C. down on K Street, I was about as anonymous as you could possibly get. Just getting up in the morning like so many people, going, taking the metro into D.C., just working. I had student loan debts, I had bills to pay, just trying to make a living, trying to pay the bills. But there was a gnawing feeling inside me that I wanted to make a difference because I saw the direction this country that I love, that you love, was heading in, and seeing how it's falling apart, the social decay. We're headed away from God. We're on a path to national suicide. Since 1973, 60 million children have been killed in America's abortion mills. We're $21 trillion in debt. We've got all kinds of liberal indoctrination being force-fed to our children in the public schools. We're on a path that doesn't lead to anywhere good. And so just as a regular citizen distressed by that, seeing the corruption in D.C., seeing how our government has failed us, seeing how even today Congress just has an approval rating of 15%. People hate Congress. And so I thought, what in the world can I do to make a difference? Because I was just one guy getting up in the morning, going to work. And in D.C., lawyers are a dime a dozen. In fact, about 1 out of every 12 residents of D.C. is a lawyer. And that's kind of a sad commentary by itself. But saying, what in the world could I do? Because no one knew me, no one cared about me. How could I possibly make a difference? Well, eventually, I decided to start writing. So I started writing and putting my work out online. And at first, hardly anyone took notice. You could have measured my audience with a microscope. But it started to build, started to pick up steam. And then in late 2009, I started a little website called the economiccollapseblog.com. And it really took off, because at the time we had that horrible recession and people were losing their jobs and their homes, and they knew they weren't getting straight answers from the mainstream media. And then we started other websites as well, and the writing started to really bloom. And my wife and I, we made the decision to leave D.C., to leave my career as an attorney, because I was only barred in D.C., and we were going to move all the way across the country to a little town called Carnation, Washington, near Seattle. And I was going to write, my wife was going to do some things with furniture, and that's how we were going to make a living. And so I shared that with, we shared that with our parents. And what do you think our parents thought? When they heard Michael's not going to be a lawyer anymore, and instead we're going to move all the way across the country, and Michael's going to make a living by writing stuff for the internet. You can imagine how that went over with our parents. They thought we were crazy, but God was in it. And because God was in it, it was tremendously successful. And in fact, over the last 7 years, our websites have been viewed more than 100 million times. And then the articles are syndicated and republished, and they appear on dozens of other conservative and Christian websites all over the country. Maybe you've heard of Charisma News, InfoWars, Zero Hedge, and the list goes on and on and on, where they're actually read far more than on our own websites. So tremendous exposure from our little home now in the hills of Bonners Ferry, where we've been coming up on 7 years. We're literally touching the world through our work. And we hear from people all over the planet that have been impacted, not only through the articles, but I'm the author of 4 books. One person that read my book in Saudi Arabia wrote me and said, Michael, I dedicated my life to Jesus Christ because of what I read in your book. So I've heard from people in South Korea, Australia, New Zealand. I mean, I could go on, all over the planet. God has opened up a door. So you think if you're going to influence the world, Washington, D.C. would be a great place to do it, right? But God has us all on a unique journey. So He took us out of there, took us to the middle of nowhere in Bonners Ferry, to the hills of Bonners Ferry. And from there, the middle of nowhere, we're literally touching people all over the planet. And then God's opened up the door for me to be a guest on radio, television, doing all these wonderful things. And I thought that's what we would do for many years to come, because we were doing a lot of good, and God had opened up some tremendous doors. And so if you would have asked me 1 year ago, Michael, will you ever run for public office? I would have said, no way, no way. God has us doing some great work now. We're very much enjoying it. But of course, God works in mysterious ways, and I think God has a sense of humor where now we might be going back to DC, where we never imagined we would go. But I felt called to run for Congress. And when I began, I didn't have anything. No organization, no money, no nothing. And so I said, God, I think I can do this, but I'm going to need some help, because I don't have any political organization. And so it's about 2 weeks before I'm formally going to enter the race. And so then Christian, who's my campaign manager, reaches out to me. And he had run for state senate in 2014. He was familiar with my work. He's like, I didn't know you lived in Bonners Ferry. He didn't even know I was running for Congress. And I said, yeah. And we started talking, and I said, yeah, and I'm running for Congress. And he's like, why in the world would you want to do that? And which is a legitimate question. But we start talking, he starts getting excited, comes on board, and it turns out he's got political connections all over the state, knows how to run a campaign, and he's one of the top political minds in the entire state. In fact, even a candidate for governor reached out to him, wanted his advice. I mean, he's in demand by candidates all over the state. But God sent me exactly what I needed for a campaign manager, not across the country, not an hour away, but literally in my own backyard in Bonners Ferry, just a couple miles away. But I had never met him in 6 years. We'd been both living up there for 6 years, never met. But God brought him along at just the right timing, and he's been doing miracles like that all along the way. And now we've got a full-on campaign organization, team, county chairs, stretching from Boundary County to Owyhee County, the most amazing group of people collectively that I've ever worked with on anything. And today, as it stands today, we are one of the front runners in this race. There's 7 people running for Congress. Election's May 15th. And there's 3 people that are tightly packed right at the top. Very super close race. We are one of those front runners, thanks to our incredibly hard work and the blessing of God upon this campaign. So we're in a position to potentially win about 40 days from now. Doesn't mean we will win, but we're in a position to potentially win. But we're going to have to work as hard as we possibly can, because it's super, super close. But once again, so why did I leave? Because I kind of had to put my writing on hold. Why did I put everything I was doing on hold to run for Congress? Because it sounds kind of crazy. Well, like so many of you, why you would be involved in an organization like this, why you would spend a weekday evening coming out to a meeting like this instead of staying at home, eating a good dinner and watching a television show, is because you care about the future of this country. And you look at what we have in Washington, D.C., and we got to 2016. I was talking with some of you before the program tonight, and we almost lost it all, because we had Hillary Clinton on one side, who's the kind of the antithesis to everything in here, the U.S. Constitution. And we'd just been 8 years under Barack Obama. Our constitutional republic's hanging by a thread. It looks like Hillary Clinton's about to win and get 4 or 8 years. Donald Trump's running against her, but it doesn't look like he's going to pull it out, although people are praying, and that's the key. But it looks like Hillary Clinton is going to win. And I asked people, what do you think would have happened if Hillary Clinton had won? What do you think would have happened if Hillary Clinton would have won the presidential election? And wherever I go, people tell me things like, Michael, it would have been over. Michael, we would have been finished. Yeah, it's game over, exactly. And what they mean, they don't mean that, you know, the United States of America would have completely ceased to exist, you know, but what they mean is that our constitutional republic, which was already hanging by a thread, we might not have ever had a chance to get this back. But with Donald Trump in the White House, has America been saved? No. But it means maybe we have an opportunity to try to save America. It's still hanging in the balance, because we've still, Donald Trump is in there and he's fighting the tide and he's fighting the establishment, but it's still very much up in the air where America is going to go. Are we going to keep going this direction towards socialism, toward atheism, toward where the progressives want to take us, where the mainstream media wants to take us, because they control the media, they control the courts, they control public education, as we were talking about before tonight. Are we going to keep going that direction, or do we have a window of opportunity with Donald Trump in the White House to try to take our government back, to try to get some godly leaders to DC who are going to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do it this way anymore. We've got to get back to God. We've got to get back to the Constitution. Because what we have in Washington today doesn't look anything like this. And wherever I go, and let me ask you guys, I'm going to ask you guys, is there anybody out there tonight that is happy with the job that Congress is doing, that you approve of the job Congress is doing? Raise your hand. All right, I asked this in North Idaho the other night. We had a meeting up in Moyet Springs, the exact same result. Nobody raised their hands. But you know what? Republicans are in control, right? They're in control of the House and the Senate. But everywhere I go, I'm talking to conservative crowds, Republican crowds, and no one is happy with the job that they're doing because it doesn't look like this. It's completely corrupt. It's all about the money, completely unresponsive to the American people. And what people like me and people like you are hungry for is to get this back. So what I would submit to you, we need to send people to Washington, D.C. that are not professional politicians, that are not going to go along with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and John McCain and the rest of the rhinos and do things the way they've been done already. Because if we keep doing the same thing, we're going to get the same result and we're going to continue to be frustrated. But we need to send somebody to Washington that is going to go and not be there to be a cog in the system, but that is going to turn the system upside down. That is going to go there and restore our constitutional republic. And that is precisely what I intend to do. And so let me go over a few things of what we hope to do in DC, and then I'll open up for questions, any questions that you all have. But if you all have one of our brochures in front of you, you'll see my wife and my 3-year-old daughter on there. She just turned 3. Her name's Atara. They're at home tonight in Bonner's Ferry. And it's tough being on the road. In fact, shortly, at the beginning of next week, we're going to go on the road for 2 weeks. I won't be home for 2 weeks. And won't be seeing them, but so that's tough. But and Miranda, she's pregnant again, another little one on the way.
Congratulations.
But this is who I'm doing it for, little Atara and our next little one that's on the way. Because if we don't stand up now, there's not going to be an America for our children and our grandchildren. Certainly not an America that looks like what our founding fathers intended. And so a lot of people tell me, Michael, it's too late. The establishment is too strong. They have too much money. Washington, D.C. is too corrupt. You can't change Congress. You can't drain the swamp. You can't. It's too far gone, Michael. It's too powerful. The establishment, they've got the media, they've got the court system. You can't fight this. You can't win. You know, and essentially the idea being this is the generation that America is going to completely go down the toilet, completely be finished. That the story of America, starting out with our founding fathers, that they put everything on the line, and all the way to all the Americans that fought and bled and died for us, and all the conflicts, all the wars to give us liberty and freedom, all the way to today, that the end of the story is that America is going to go out with a whimper, that the left is going to win, that the America that we know and love is going to be destroyed. I don't want that to be the end of our story. So I don't like our founding fathers, who they put everything on the line. Our founding fathers, they stood up to the mighty British Empire. Now, the British Empire was the most powerful empire in the whole world at that time. But our founding fathers, many of them who were in their 20s or 30s, younger than I am, you know, younger than most of us in this room, they put their families, their futures, their businesses, their everything on the line. If they would have been caught by the British and they would have failed, they would have been hung by the British. But they put everything on the line to go against the mighty British Empire. And because they were willing to do that, the United States of America exists today. And now it's our turn. And now we don't have to pick up bullets and guns. But what we have to do is we have to stand up and fight for this Constitution, this constitutional republic, and say, hey, we're not going to lay down. We're not going to let this be the generation when the flame is extinguished. That we still, even though this flag is tattered and it's taken some wear and tear, and even though the principles we believe in that we've gone through a lot and we're barely hanging in there. You know, the flame is still alive. You know, when I first met John, I saw it in his heart. When I first met Travis, I saw it in his heart. The flame is still alive. And I'm not going to let this be the generation when the flame is put out. So if the left wants to win, if they want to destroy America, if they want to get rid of this, well, they're going to have to crawl over my dead body to do it. And so, but let me tell you a little bit about what we're up against. And if you want to look in the brochure, unlike most professional politicians who are very vague, they'll maybe bring up a few safe points that everyone agrees on, but then other than that, they really don't want to talk about a whole lot. We try to be very specific, give you the meat and the substance of what we're all about in our brochure. So the first thing that you should know about me is I'm a pro-Trump Christian conservative. So I'm pro-Trump. You guys might have noticed, and for the camera, let me hold up your sign there. I noticed that you grabbed the sign before the meeting because this gentleman's going to put in his yard. Right at the top it says, vote pro-Trump. You know, we are proud of President Trump because, you know, Donald Trump, he set forth an agenda that electrified America. And when he came out, he talked kind of like I'm talking tonight. Not like a wimpy professional politician who we send to Washington, D.C. Seems like they've all had their backbone surgically removed, right? No, Donald Trump came out and he said, I'm a fighter, right? And he said, I'm going to tell you what I think, and I don't care what people think. I don't care about the politically correct media. I'm going to tell it to you straight. And he set forth an agenda that we believed in, and we want to go to Washington to implement that agenda. That's why it's on our signs. It's right on the front of our brochure. Or if you go to michaelsnyderforcongress.com, you're greeted by a pro-Trump message. Because we believe Donald Trump needs some friends in Washington, and we want to implement a conservative agenda with President Trump. Now, another thing you need to know about me is I'm conservative. In fact, the Coeur d'Alene Press says that I'm the most conservative candidate in this race. But don't take their word for it. Compare what we believe, whether it's in our brochure or online at michaelsnyderforcongress.com, and then compare it to the other guys. And when you do, well, you can come to the same conclusion. In fact, I've never had one voter come back after doing the comparison, not a single voter come back to me and say, you know, Michael, I really think one of the other guys is more conservative than you. In this whole time, since we first announced our campaign on July 4th, officially, of last year, I've never had one voter tell me that one of the other guys is more conservative. And then the third thing you guys should know about me is that I'm a Christian. I am very proud to say I'm a Bible-believing Christian. I'm born again. I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And we need to take Christian values back to Washington, D.C. Amen. Yeah. Amen. I've got some amens over here. Because ultimately, it's not just a political battle where we've got Republicans against Democrats, but literally we are in a spiritual battle for the soul of our nation. It's between light and darkness. It's between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of the evil one. And for far too long, the wrong side has been on the march. And we need someone to go to Washington, D.C. and proudly hold up a Bible and say, this is the blueprint. Because, as I mentioned earlier, this Constitution, our Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights came out of a culture of Bible-believing Christians. And if we truly want to make America great again, we need to go back to the values and principles that made us great in the first place. All right. All right, the second point on here is time to drain the swamp. And I could talk for several hours on this, but let me give you one example of what I'm talking about. Because whoever wins this race is going to go to Washington with all the other new members of Congress. And they're going to sit down and they're going to be told at orientation what they're supposed to do. And so as a new member of Congress, I will be expected to raise $200,000 for the NRCC, which is the National Republican Congressional Committee, which is a PAC. But it's called paying your dues, and that's what I would be expected to do. But that's just the base level. If eventually I wanted to be on an A-level committee, one of the committees everybody wants to be on, I would be expected to raise $400,000 for the NRCC. Now, if I wanted to be someday a committee chair of a B-level committee, I would be expected to raise more than $800,000 for the NRCC. And if someday I wanted to be a chair of an A-level committee, I would be expected to raise $1.2 million for the NRCC. So essentially today, committee chairs are for sale on Capitol Hill. Now that should offend you. It greatly offends me. And so how are members of Congress supposed to raise these ridiculous sums of money? Well, it's very simple. At orientation, I'll be sitting there, and I'll also be told how I'm supposed to raise that money. And it's very simple. And at orientation, you're told how you're supposed to spend your time. And as a new member of Congress, you're told that you should spend about 2 hours a day on floor/committee, essentially doing your job, right? But then you're supposed to spend about 4 hours a day dialing for dollars on the phone, making fundraising calls to people like you to raise all this money that needs to be raised.
That's ridiculous.
It is, you know, and because they can't make these calls from their offices by law, they have to go across the street. There's 2 giant call centers, one for Republicans and one for Democrats. And 60 Minutes has actually gone in and took a secret camera into the Republican one. Very bleak, very depressing, and you sit there. You sit down at your little station, and then there's a board up there showing how much you've raised, and they give you a script. And the script tells you what you're supposed to say, and then for each person, they give you information. So they'll say, like, Joe such and such, and he's married to Ellen, and they have 2 children, whatever it is. And the whole goal is for that member of Congress to sit there and try to get as much money out of that person as quickly as they can, and move on to the next call. And that's how they spend day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. So you wonder why Congress can't get anything done? This is the big secret. Because first of all, Congress is only in session about 140 days out of the year. But then when they are actually working, they're spending half the time on the telephone trying to raise money. And this is why they always say, oh, we have to rush to get things done because they're not getting anything done because they're on the telephone. So I've made a pledge to you. When I go to Washington, I'm not going to participate in this system. I'm not going to make those calls because I'm going to go there to do the job that you all sent us there to do. And I'm going to do whatever I can to bring this system down because I believe members of Congress should be working for you, not on the phone raising money constantly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And everywhere I go, on the campaign trail, I've been talking about this. And everywhere I go, you know, and we do so many events where all the other candidates are there. And I keep challenging them over and over and over, make this pledge with me. If you go to Washington, tell them that you're not going to make these calls. You know, but you know what? None of them have made this pledge. Because they all know if they want to stay in the good graces of Paul Ryan, they got to make the calls. So they're all afraid. They're all professional politicians. None of them will make the promise to you that I'm making. Because they don't want to drain the swamp. They want to go there and be part of it, climb the ladder, and get the fame and wealth and money and power. Amen. That's why we got to quit sending professional politicians who are in it for themselves to Washington.
Amen. Yeah.
Because, you know, it's so frustrating. But this is why, guys, if we keep doing the same things we have been doing, we're going to keep getting the same results. It's time for a change. And speaking of Paul Ryan, and that brings us to the third point here. And we got brochures here up here afterwards. If you guys want to take these brochures, share them with your friends, because we want to encourage people to vote. And point number 3, every rhino must go. Rhino, of course, means Republican in name only, right? And if somebody running for office, like my opponents, won't use the term rhino, it probably means they are one. You know, but if you're running for Congress, you can. That's why I've pledged that I will never vote for Paul Ryan for Speaker of the House.
Yeah, don't you dare, please send you.
You're right. You're right. Well, I was raised as a Christian. I take the 10 Commandments very seriously.
Yes.
And so I was raised to say what I do what I say, and keep my word even when it hurts.
Yeah.
But once again, the other people I'm running against won't make the same pledge to never vote against Paul Ryan. But Paul Ryan's got to go. Mitch McConnell in the Senate's got to go. John McCain, they've all got to go. Because what did we just see happen? The $1.3 trillion omnibus spending bill. Did you guys hear about that bill? Conservatives all over the country are furious. Well, it was Paul Ryan's bill. He brought the bill. He pushed it through. But it was 2,232 pages long, right? And Republicans were given less than 24 hours to read it before they were expected to vote on it. which that's the kind of thing the Democrats used to do, but now Republicans are doing it. And it fully funded Planned Parenthood. It had all kinds of other liberal priorities. But other than a bump in military spending, conservative priorities were almost completely absent from the bill. But Paul Ryan said, we've got to have this. We've got to rush this through. And then they passed it, and exploding our national debt even more. But this is why we need new leadership in Washington, because Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer afterwards were basically almost dancing a jig because they were so happy about what was in the bill. We can't do it this way anymore, guys. All right, let me go over a few more issues real quick, then I'll take some questions. Number 4 here, I'm 100% pro-life. Of course, all Republicans say they're pro-life, right? But then they go to Washington, they go to Boise, and they vote to fund bills that fund Planned Parenthood, right? Just like this bill I was just talking about fully funds Planned Parenthood, but most Republicans voted for it. So, but you cannot be pro-life and vote to fund Planned Parenthood.
No, you cannot shed innocent blood and get away with it.
Amen, amen. So this is my pledge to you. When I go to Washington, I will never, ever, ever vote for a bill that gives any money to fund Planned Parenthood. Even if there's a single penny in there in a bill for Planned Parenthood, it's an automatic no. And if we could just get every member of the House to take the same pledge, Planned Parenthood would be defunded automatically. But it greatly frustrates me that our members of Congress will not fight to defund Planned Parenthood. And then beyond that, of course, that's just the first stage. Beyond that, I want to see every Planned Parenthood in America, every Planned Parenthood clinic in America shut down, and I'll fight relentlessly until that happens. And ultimately, we want to see abortion brought to an end in this country, because like I said, there's 60 million dead American children, and when are we going to stand up and say enough is enough? All right. I'm also 100% pro-gun. We saw what just happened in Florida, right? And immediately the Democrats want to politicize it. Immediately these kids start going on television and the media just laps it up. And even some Republican politicians say, well, maybe we can compromise. You know, some Republicans start saying, well, maybe we need to do something about bump stocks. Maybe we need to do something about raising the age from 18 to 21. Well, you know what? The answer to that and every other infringement on our Second Amendment rights is no.
That's right, exactly.
You know, we can never compromise on the Second Amendment even a single inch. In fact, we need to go back and start repealing all these federal gun laws that are already infringing on our Second Amendment rights, like the Gun Control Act of 1968, the National Firearms Act of 1934, and then the BATFE, which has been harassing legal gun owners for decades, and we need to do something about them. So whatever we can do to reduce their jurisdiction, power, scope, and ultimately leading up to eventually I would like to see them abolished. So are we good on time? Do I have time for a little bit more?
The floor is yours.
Good, thank you. So when it comes to the Second Amendment, that's sacred, and we cannot move one single inch. As it says, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
That's right.
Now, number 6, abolish the IRS and the income tax. Now, do any of you remember Helen Chenoweth? She represented this district so well for 3 terms quite a few years ago, but this was actually in her platform too. She wanted to get rid of the income tax, because this time of year, many of you are doing the income tax, doing your taxes. And it's frustrating, it's super complicated. In fact, Americans spend billions of hours a year and tens of billions of dollars just complying with our income tax. It's ridiculous. And I remember earlier I said I have an LLM in taxation. Well, I actually spent an entire year studying the tax code. And at the end of the year, and throughout the year, I had learned that the tax code is over 2 million words long. The regulations are over 7 million words long. And so in total, it's close to 10 million words. And it's a complete abomination. And at the end of that year studying it, I came to the conclusion that the best thing we can do is throw it in a shredder and start over. But people ask me, Michael, without an income tax, how are we going to fund the government? Well, the federal income tax accounts for about 46% of all federal revenue. And so if we actually shrunk the size of the government back to the appropriate constitutional size, we would be just fine. But if we can't shrink it enough in the short term because of resistance from the Democrats and the establishment Republicans, well, what we can do in the short term at least, we could go to a flat tax or a fair tax, which would be far superior to what we have today. But eventually, I believe the goal would be to get rid of the income tax as we know it today entirely. I also want to abolish the Federal Reserve. My opponents are not even talking about the Federal Reserve, but the Federal Reserve is really at the very heart of our economic and financial problems. Because if you pull out a dollar bill, and if you look right at the top, what does it say? It says Federal Reserve Note. You know, when you ask people, where does money come from? Well, most people can't even tell you. Most people think the government just prints it up. But no, the Federal Reserve actually creates our money. And then what happens is the Federal Reserve exchanges Federal Reserve notes, and usually it's electronic, usually it's not paper currency, but they'll exchange it for U.S. Treasury bonds, which the government gives to the Federal Reserve, which the Federal Reserve auctions off, which those U.S. Treasury bonds are debt. And so but we have to pay interest on that debt, so when new money is created, actually more debt is created than money. So how are we going to pay that off? Well, the theory is we'll spin this money around the economy at a fast enough rate and tax it at a high enough rate that we can pay for everything the government needs to do, plus pay off the debt. Of course, does that ever actually happen? No. So then the government has to go back and say, okay, Federal Reserve, we need more of this stuff, we need more money, so the cycle continues. So it's actually an endless debt spiral. It was created by design by the bankers in 1913. They came up with a system. It was designed to create an endless debt spiral. That's the reason why the size of our national debt since 1913 has gotten more than 6,000 times larger, because it's baked into the cake. It's what the system is designed to do. So yeah, we need to cut back on our spending because our politicians spend too much money, but until we fix this system, our national debt's going to keep growing because it's literally what the system is designed to do. All right, and so, you know, people say, well, Michael, if we don't have a Federal Reserve, if we don't have an income tax, won't that be a disaster? Won't our system completely fall apart? Well, if you go back between 1872 and 1913, we didn't have a central bank, we didn't have an income tax, and it was actually the greatest period of economic growth in U.S. history. Free markets work if you allow them to. All right, let me just quickly go over a few more, then I'll take some of your questions. Number 8, supporting our veterans. Under the Obama administration, our veterans were treated very, very badly. Our veterans deserve our best. Have any of you served in the armed forces? Thank you for your service. My father is a veteran. He served in the Navy. And, you know, for those that have sacrificed for our country, you all deserve our best. But instead, so often, what we have been giving you is our worst. So I'm thankful for our president, President Trump, that believes in veterans, is trying to turn this around. When I go to Congress, I want to be the best friend of veterans that I can possibly be. All right, let's talk about education, because we were talking about this before. Tonight, people were saying our system of education is horrible, and I agree.
It is.
And you know what? The more the federal government takes control, the more the federal government gets involved, the worse it gets, right? This top-down system we have today is not working. So what I would like to do is abolish the Department of Education and return control over education to the state, local, community level, to the parents, because we can make far better decisions about the education of our own children than some bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., who are always going to be far more liberal than we are. In addition, Common Core. You guys know about Common Core, right?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Terrible. Especially even on such a basic level of, have you heard about Common Core math? How they're teaching our children to add and subtract today?
Can't be done.
It's a nightmare. And my father, when he retired from the Navy, he was actually a math teacher, and it drives him up a wall. The Common Core is horrible. It was created by a bunch of leftists. It needs to be abolished in all 50 states. But you know what? It hasn't even been abolished in Idaho yet, in our state legislature, which boggles my mind why they can't get it done. But we need to get rid of Common Core. And you know what? The person that I'm running against, my main competition, who's probably going to win if I don't win, because we're neck and neck, he was in the state Senate. Common Core came through his committee. He was there when it passed. And now he says it was a bait and switch. Now he says he's against it. And yet, He took the father of Common Core in Idaho. The guy's name is Tom Luna. Tom Luna gave money to his campaign, and then he took Tom Luna, the father of Common Core in Idaho, and actually put him on his campaign team. So why would you do that if you're against Common Core? I don't understand, but this is why I'm not a professional politician. All right. A few more things very quickly. 100% repeal of Obamacare. I don't understand why they didn't take that exact same bill that they got to Barack Obama's desk, you know, when Obama was president, repealing Obamacare, why that wasn't on Trump's desk day one when Trump got into the White House. Why couldn't they do that? But now it's been over a year and we're still waiting for Obamacare to be repealed. And the Democrats are just laughing all day long. They just think it's tremendously funny that the Republicans, they have control of everything, can't even get Obamacare repealed, nor have we built the wall yet. President Trump, he was campaigning on building the wall. He wants to build the wall, but the rhinos in Washington won't let him get that done. But we've had a system of immigration for decades that hasn't worked, and that's why we need a wall. Because what we've done is this. The front door, letting people in legally, well, people don't want to come in through the legal process. It takes forever. It's super complicated. It costs a lot of money. I've actually helped someone with this process, and I know it's a nightmare, right? But then meanwhile, we've left the back door completely wide open, saying, come on in, illegal immigrants, gang members, drug dealers, Islamic terrorists, right? Islamic terrorists come across the border. You know, people want to abuse the system. Come to our sanctuary cities where you'll be taken care of, protected from the federal government. And, you know, we'll make sure they leave you alone. No, we need to end sanctuary cities. Right. That's why, you know, city council members, mayors, even someone like Governor Jerry Brown, when they're flouting the federal government, because one of the few things the federal government's actually supposed to do is defend our borders, protect our nation. So, but when they interfere with that, you know, these local politicians need to be held accountable. If we started holding them accountable, the sanctuary cities would disappear pretty quickly. But then beyond that, we need to slam the back door shut. That's why we need to build a wall, have security on the border, so everyone's got to come in through the front door. Then make that process make sense, because people are always going to come to this country legally. I mean, President Trump's wife is a legal immigrant. We just need to know who's coming in, and so we don't have a bunch of Islamic terrorists running across the border. So I believe in border security. I believe in fighting Islamic terror. And by the way, I'm deeply concerned about all these unvetted refugees which are coming over from terrorist hotbeds. We've talked about that previously. So that is a big concern of mine as well. So I'll just wrap up here real quick, then we'll take some questions. But those are just a few of the issues. We have so many more on our website. I didn't even touch on a whole bunch of ones in the brochure. Because we want you guys to know exactly what we believe, where we're coming from, and when we go to Washington, we're going to do those things. We want to create an entirely different paradigm for what it means to be a member of Congress, where a lot of these guys, they come, and then you vote for them, you donate to their campaigns, then they go to Washington, they betray us over and over and over again, and you don't hear from them again until next election season when they come back around, say all the things we want to hear, fool a whole lot of people into voting for them again. We don't want to be that way. We want to go and we want constant two-way communication, giving you guys constant updates through social media, through articles, through letter writing, and about what we're doing, what's really going on. Total transparency is what we want to be about. And then we want to take advantage of your all expertise in helping us get things done in Washington. Because we're going to have a lot more time than the other guys in Washington to get things done, because I'm not going to be on the telephone all day long. Instead, I'm going there to help Donald Trump take our government back. I'm going there to turn over the tables. I'm not going there to get along. In fact, I don't know if you guys have figured this out yet, and we understand this very clearly, if we go to Washington, we will very rapidly become the most hated member of Congress by CNN, MSNBC, ABC News. Once they figure out who we are and what we're all about, and because we're not going to sit in a corner and be quiet about it either, as you guys might have figured out, we're very bold, we're very upfront, we're a fighter, we're going to be talking to anyone we can talk to about all the corruption, about the things that need to change. So once they figure out who we are and what we're about, oh, they're going to call us crazy, they're going to hate us, And I'm sure we'll get lots of national attention because we're going there because we're in a civil war, guys. It's not a shooting war. It's not a civil war with bullets and guns, but we're in a war for the future of this country. And we need a few good men who are going to stand up and say to the leadership of both parties, no, we're not going to do it this way anymore. Now we need people that are going to go to Washington and say, whatever comes, whatever they want to threaten me with, because in the Republican leadership, they're going to literally kick me out of the lunchroom. They're not going to like me, but, and of course the Democrats are going to hate me, but we need people that are going to fight for this and do whatever they can to get this back, because this is our window. If we miss our window now, we may not ever have another one. But we need people that are going to go and fight for the things that just as a conservative person all these years, I've been so frustrated that people go to Washington, they never fight for the things we really care about. So that's my pledge to you. I'm going to go, I'm going to fight for this with everything that I've got. And ultimately, I don't know, when the Lord called me to do this, I had no idea of everything I was getting into, but I'm just trying to be obedient. And in every generation, there's been Americans who have had to stand up and fight for liberty and freedom, and now it's our turn. We can do this. We can start a fire that's going to sweep across this nation. In fact, we've got several dozen people on the national level we're promoting that are pro-Trump, good conservatives, because we need a team in Washington. So we're trying to get a whole bunch of people there to join us. And Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take time, just like when our founders declared independence, they didn't get it overnight. It took time and a whole lot of fighting and effort, and a lot of blood was spilled before they finally got it. It's also going to take time to fully get this back. But we need people that are willing to point the way and say, America is going to be ruled by liberty and freedom, and we're going to stand on the U.S. Constitution. It's being trampled on for too long. We're sick and tired of it, and we need a new generation that's going to stand up, point to the flag and say, we still believe in this, we still believe in Almighty God, and we're not going to back down until we restore the promise that our forefathers gave us. So thank you guys. I'll take any questions that you have. Also, before I take questions really quickly, we've got signs, we've got brochures, we've got other materials. We need your help, because I can't do this alone. We can't do this alone. It's a super close election. So if any of you can help with the campaign, we need all hands on deck. Like I said, it's super, super close between three of us. The election's in about 40 days. We need help here in this county. We need help in Kootenai County. So if you're willing to help us, you can sign up in the back with Christian to be a volunteer, get on the volunteer list, or if you can help us any other way, it's a huge help. And early voting is starting soon. And what we're encouraging everyone, because everyone knows 10 people. So if you've got 10 people, friends, family, neighbors, people on your email list, people on social media that you can contact and say, hey, go vote. Early voting has begun. Here's where you can go vote today, and here's the guy to vote for. If all of our people just get 10 people to go out and vote, we're going to win this thing. So if you know just 10 people that you can stay on, and make sure, just don't tell them, stay on them until they vote. That would be a huge help. But I was going to take questions if time permits.
I'd just like to say something. How many of you guys are following the school shootings and all that across the country? So, right now, they're doing everything in their power to remove guns, AR-15s, removing our rights. When they remove our rights, they're also removing the Constitution.
Exactly.
Take that into consideration when you guys go out to the polls to vote.
Yeah.
Are we here to stand for our rights, our Constitution, or are we here to bow and allow it to happen on our clock?
Right.
So that's all I'm asking you guys all to take into consideration.
And the Second Amendment really protects all the other rights. So it's really the keystone of it all, because without the Second Amendment, we don't even have the ability to defend the rest of our rights. So does anyone have questions? Yes, ma'am.
You know, to keep these kids from doing what they're doing, there needs to be better mental health.
Yes.
Because when I taught, I had kids that were, we needed to get help for them, and it was hard doing it.
You're right. And the mental health in this system has been decaying. It's been neglected greatly, because it's not just physical health, but we have serious mental health. And a big part of it is we've had the breakdown of the family. where so many people are getting, we've got broken homes, divorces, broken families, and then our kids, you know, sit down and watch endless hours of television and movies. In fact, average American spends 5 hours a day watching television, you know, and when you let anyone pump thousands of hours of garbage in your mind, it's going to have a huge impact. And then ultimately it's a spiritual thing as well, where as a nation we turned away from God, and as a result people don't have that moral foundation, and that contributes to the mental health problems as well. So ultimately part of my role as a member of Congress is not, I see part of my role as a member of Congress to point this nation back to God.
Right.
Because you know, you look in the Bible, someone like Josiah, as a political figure, as a king, he pointed Israel back to God, and they had one of the greatest revivals we see in the entire Bible. And so I believe as political leaders, we need to point the direction where we need to go as a nation, not just politically, but also spiritually. So I'll be very open about the fact that America needs to turn back to Jesus Christ if we want to have a positive future for this nation.
We need to put him back in the classroom.
Yeah. And people say, in the shooting in Florida happened in the school, they're like, where's God? You know, somebody on the left said, well, you all kicked God out of the schools a long time ago, you know?
Yeah.
You're right.
Who is it that authorizes sweetheart deals for corporations in regards to taxes?
Sometimes that happens on the state level. So a lot of that is the responsibility of Boise, where they'll say, we really want you, such and such corporation, to come to this state, and if you'll come, then we'll give you a huge break on your taxes, or you won't have to pay any taxes at all. So most of the time it's on the state level. Sometimes it's on the local community level. They'll give them breaks on their property taxes, things like that. So it depends what kind of deal you're talking about. But a lot of times it happens on the state level, not so much on the federal level, but it's not when states are competing with one another to draw in corporations. You'll see those kind of deals.
I understand those, but what about the ones that deal with international corporations, where they can play all kinds of money shuttling games, so they end up owing no income tax?
Oh, you're talking about where they play and they move money around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, even companies like Google are doing that, shipping money to tax havens and so forth. And this is one of the reasons why our tax system is so archaic and is broken, because big corporations like me and you get, you know, as working class people, middle class people, get taxed into oblivion. Meanwhile, a lot of these big corporations are making tons of money, but often they pay little or no taxes because they know how to play the games. They know how to move it to a tax haven offshore, move it here, move it there. So yeah, that's another reason why our system of taxation is broken. But another potential tax system alternative to what we have today is like an electronic payments tax, or electronic financial tax, which would automatically tax a very, very small percentage of each transaction, and we could do away with the income tax and replace it with that, which then these corporations wouldn't be able to escape that. So yeah, the system we have today is broken, it's archaic, it doesn't work, and the very wealthy and the big corporations, they often pay the least taxes because they know how to game the system. And so that's another reason why our current system has got to go. Any other questions, concerns, comments?
What do you feel about the term limits?
I'm in favor of term limits. Now I know there's good conservatives on both sides of this issue. In fact, I know some good conservatives that are against term limits. But to me, I see someone like Nancy Pelosi up there, who she can barely put two words together anymore, right? Honestly.
She's so confused.
But she'll be able to keep winning elections as long as they can keep wheeling her out, because she's got the name recognition, she's got the political machine, she can raise tons of money, and you know, she's in such a safe Democratic district that people see her name out there, they're going to check her name every time. So our founding fathers never envisioned that people would spend 30 or 40 years in DC making it a career. They always envisioned kind of servant leaders who would go for a time, serve, and then go home again, back to what they were doing. So I'm very much in favor of term limits. I also know it's going to be hard to get, but to get members of Congress to agree to limit their own political careers, man, that's not going to be easy, but it's worth fighting for. So I'm in favor of term limits, would love to see them happen, and we'll fight for them. Other questions, concerns, comments? Yes, sir.
How do we keep our government's fingers out of our social security?
Yeah.
Good question.
That's a great question because
Yeah.
they already put their fingers into the Social Security, right? Because we're supposed to have a giant Social Security trust fund sitting there. When the baby boomers would retire, we would be in pretty good shape. But instead it's filled up with IOUs because the Democrats decided, hey, let's go in and start using that money for other things and we'll just stick a bunch of IOUs in there. And then, of course, it continued under Republican administrations, too. So now we've got a giant Social Security trust fund that's filled with nothing but IOUs. So it's a massive problem. But we've got to make sure we keep the promises that were made to your generation, because you all are counting on that money to be there, because you paid into the system for decades, counting on it to be there. And we've got to make sure we keep those promises to you. And so that's a bit, you know, and we're $21 trillion in debt. And that's why we can't, you know, when we saw what was in that bill, all the crazy things, whether it was, you know, foreign aid to Pakistan, helping, you know, all the crazy money that was going overseas for crazy things, we can't be doing that because we're broke and we've got all these promises to our seniors that we just got a bunch of IOUs sitting there, that we're going to have a problem. So we got to get our priorities in order, and we got to make sure the Social Security system is sustainable for the long term, so that it's always going to be there for those who need it. And I know that's going to be a great challenge because we're massively in debt. We're drowning in red ink, and we've got to make choices. We can't keep spending far more money than we're bringing in. We can't keep consuming far more wealth than we're producing, because eventually the party's going to come to an end, and the whole thing's going to collapse if we don't get our house in order.
There's an obvious connection between the necessary fundraising and these unnecessary expenditures. You know that people have to do favors in order to get the contributions that they need to do the other stuff. So.
Oh, you're talking about members of Congress?
Yeah, again, it's the money in politics.
Yeah. Yeah, what happens is, and this is a whole nother thing which I could talk a long time about, but if you're a member of Congress, the lobbyists will come to you and they'll say, hey, a bill is coming up and we really want you to vote a certain way on that, you know? And it won't be, you know, they won't say anything about a bribe, but the understanding is this. If you vote the right way and you do what the lobbyist wants you to do, then you'll be invited to receptions, and they're often held very close to the Capitol there, these fancy restaurants, these fancy facilities. So you go across and you're invited to these receptions, you get your invitation, you go across the street, and then there's campaign checks sitting there waiting for you. So it's a form of legalized bribery, but they don't call it that. But everyone knows how the game is played. And that's why they get all this stuff into the bills, because they know if they do what these guys tell them to do, that the money will be sitting there waiting for them at these receptions later on. You know, so they know, you know, what side of the thing their check is written on. So it's a deeply, deeply corrupt system, guys.
Yes, it is.
And if we don't send people there with a passion to fix it, it never will get fixed. So that's why we need people. If people are not talking about fixing the system, overturning the system now when they're running for office, they're sure not going to fight for it when they're 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C. and they're, you know, they think they're out, you know, out of view of the public. So, guys, we've got to send people there that are going to fight to change this deeply, deeply corrupt system. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Well, thank you guys for coming. I'll be here for as long as you guys want to talk, any questions you might have. Once again, we need some help, and in particular, we would love to have some people help us walking some neighborhoods, whether it's locally or in Kootenai County. You know, just walking, taking some of our brochures, putting them on a doorstep. You know, hitting as many as possible. We already have teams out doing it all over the district, but we need more help. So if you guys can help with that or anything else we're doing, or even like I said, it's as simple as if you can reach out to your 10 people you know and tell them, hey, go vote, early voting, because early voting is going to begin in most counties either April 23rd or April 30th. So we don't want them to wait till May 15th. As soon as early voting begins in your area, tell people, hey, go out and vote. Here's the guy to vote for. And because you know what? They're projecting that turnout will be about 20% for this primary. So that means 80% of Republican voters will stay home. So if we can just capture 2% of that 80%, 2% of that 80%, and get them to go out to vote and to vote for us, we will win this election. Because it's that close, and that's how the numbers tell us. And so it's not going to take a whole bunch to turn the tide, but we need your help. So if you guys can help us, it would be greatly appreciated.
So I'm gonna bring it up because I've already talked to you, so I know where you stand on these things, but for the sake of everybody else here who hasn't met you, you know, so where do you stand on the federal government's reach here in Idaho where they claim to own 64% of the land?
Right.
With the EPA and the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, of course, you know, that are constantly violating ranchers' rights, their water rights, taking their land. Basically, you know, declared war on ranchers everywhere in America. You know what I mean? Where do you stand on that and what's your plan towards that?
Yeah. Well, the plan is very simple because once again, it's getting back to this. Nowhere in here does it authorize the federal government to own all this land. Nowhere in here does it authorize the federal government to own and control more than 60% of the land in Idaho. And I don't read anything about an EPA in here or a BLM. So I want to abolish both of them. I want to get rid of them because they're horrible. And then ultimately in terms of I want to get control of our own land for the people of Idaho. And you know what? We've got tremendous wealth under our feet. They call us the gem state for a reason. We've got oil, we've got natural gas, we've got, I mean, talk about rare earth elements, which are in all of your phones, all of your consumer electronics, which Idaho should be one of the global centers for rare earth elements. But it's not today, but it should be because we have a tremendous rare earth elements here in Idaho. So I want to get control of our land for the people of Idaho, and if we got control of our own land, we'd be one of the wealthiest states in the entire country, and our state budget problems would be gone permanently. We could fund education, all the other things we need to do. But right now, the federal government's locked it all up, controls, you know, over 60% of it, and it's wrong. And we need to get back to this. And this, nowhere in here does it give the federal government the power to do that. So, you know, I'm a big believer in the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment says, whatever is not specifically delegated to the federal government by the U.S. Constitution, all those powers and rights are supposed to be for the states or for the people. So I want to get our 10th Amendment back. I want to get back to this. And in fact, if you look at Article 1, Section 8, which lists what the Congress is actually supposed to do, it's actually very, very limited. So, but you know, some of the things we are actually supposed to be doing, the Congress is not actually doing. So let me read you just a few words, if I may, from Article 1, Section 8 of what the Congress is actually supposed to be doing. Quote, quote, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Is Congress doing that today? No. You know, so we need to get back to doing the things that we're supposed to be doing and get away from the EPA, the BLM, you know, government controlling more than 60% of the land in Idaho. You know, the government should not be doing that. And in fact, we've got someone on our campaign team, Colton Boyles, who's one of the attorneys that's helping the state of Utah try to get control of their land back. So we've actually got someone on our own campaign team that's intimately involved in this issue.
So it doesn't say anywhere in there about being on the phone for 4 to 6 hours raising money for the government?
No, it doesn't.
Well, I was just kidding.
And to me, it's a betrayal. It's a betrayal of the people to be there raising money all day long when the people didn't send a telemarketer to Washington. That's not what you guys want. When you send someone to Washington, you don't want to send a telemarketer. You want to send a member of Congress who's going to fight for the things you believe in. So these guys that have been on the phone 4 or 5 hours a day raising money, they're betraying all of us because to me, they're violating the Constitution because they're not fulfilling the duties of their office. And why won't these guys I'm running against take the pledge not to make those calls? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of Paul Ryan. They haven't even got to DC yet. So once again, thank you guys. If you guys have any more questions, I'll be around as long as you want. And like I said, the election's coming up really fast. And let me leave you with this, because we're not just talking. The term of a U.S. representative is 2 years. But once someone wins one of these positions in Idaho, whoever wins this primary is going to go on and win the general election, because we're such a safe, conservative Republican district. Whoever wins the primary is going to win the general election in November. And if one of these other guys wins, and the two guys I'm running against are not good guys, let's just put it that way. If one of them wins, and they become the incumbent, and they have all the money and the whole backing of the party and the name recognition and all that, it will be literally just about impossible to get them out. And I know one in particular wants to have a very long political career. So literally the fate of our seat in Congress for the next possibly 20, 25, 30 years could be determined 40 days from now. So, and this is our shot to keep one of those guys out of that seat. So if we're going to do this, we've got to do it now, because with this seat, we won't have another chance. So anyway, thank you guys. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Everybody here that's a Christian needs to pray for you, your family, and most of all, for your safety.
Thank you. Yeah, prayer is what we need more than anything, and just by the grace of God. On Monday we started a road trip. We'll be gone 2 weeks straight, hitting town after town, city after city, doing events. And if I sound a little hoarse or a little tired tonight, by the end of that, man, they'll have to prop me up with a somehow, because it'll be a challenge. So pray for grace, strength, and energy, and pray for God's will to be done on May 15th, one way or the other.
Well, Michael, I appreciate you coming out to the little town of Wallace, Idaho.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Muchly appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thank
Absolutely.
you all for coming tonight. I appreciate it. I'm gonna sit down for a minute. Let me grab some water.
No, Chad.
I've got friends over in Florida. All taken off?
Get out.
Oh,
Michael.
Do all that homework, right?
There's a lot of good content on today.
Go back to playing my video games.
Oh, okay. Homework would be nice.
How about you?
Oh, that's right, you're right. They can have those.
Yeah, Mom.
Down in my neck of the woods that
And I'm sure.
Every time I'm here, I always
all
see
the
you.
so
But that one was so
Oh, is that you?
Yeah.
I can't walk around.
They taught us
Yeah, well, we do.
you gotta go above that on every show. Otherwise, you get to
and then right on the
out there that we all hear about. You don't do that. So that's the other thing that I like about
And I got lots of friends right here.
That's right. Yeah, we don't work
So that's different. That's for thoughts about your not for hiding identity or anything.
We're doing a lot though, and we're gonna start things you can hear about.
So I can shut this off.
We were going here the other one day, we did a lot of things.
Yeah.
And then some of it.